Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 11 in the sixth discourse of the mimer, the great mimer, Kol Machlokes, 5672, which is the sixth discourse in the overall book, B'Shasha Ekdimu, 5672. We are holding in the middle of chapter 23. This is the second class of chapter 23. Yesterday we began discussing this incredible mashal and example that he gives for the process of differentiating a all-encompassing potential energy and bringing forth the hidden details. And when you bring forth one of its potentials, or one of its what was once concealed in the overall general light, and when you specify it and differentiate it, how in that process it diminishes the power of that energy in a very, very great way. And we were learning the example of separating a letter. When you have a word, especially a word that has a lot of meaning to it, like a word like baruch, which means a blessing. And he went through and explained all the content, both in the regular meaning of the word blessing, and then how it implies in the sphirot, in the divine realms, blessings, as we discussed earlier. And you take that just one letter from that, and you separate the bays from the rest of the word, how suddenly, even though it's the same exact letter that was part of the greater, that contained within it the greater powerful idea of a blessing, now, when the letter is separated, there is but a trace of a trace left of it, and that shows us that the differentiation and this, even though in essence it's the same, but just the mere fact of separating it from the greater whole makes it unrecognizable to what it was before. Okay, and then he continues Makolshkin, and that's even if the word baruch is just the word baruch. It says if you learn with a child and you just separate the bays. Especially if the word baruch was attached to other words, like the word blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into existence, which inside of that has an incredible understanding, an incredible idea. I mean, it's not just the word baruch, which means blessing, which in it of itself is great. When you say blessed is the one who spoke, it's part of the prayer in the morning, our morning prayers. Baruch Sha'amar, blessed is the one who spoke, and the world came into being. So now that letter bays is not just part of a word, it's part of a sentence. And each letter contributes to the overall meaning of the sentence. If you're missing a letter, then the sentence is lacking. You right away notice it, even if you understand the meaning, but you realize, hey, someone misspelled it. There's like a hole, there's like a piece missing, right? So now, once the letter was part of the idea in it, it was a huge concept. Separate that one letter, it becomes reduced to just the meaning of the letter bays, which is so tiny compared to its meaning as it is part of the greater thing. And now he's going to explain what Baruch Sha'amar v'haya olam would mean, just briefly, and the idea that is presented and therefore is facilitated in this phrase. What is the idea that's in that phrase? That just with one utterance, with God's utterance, God didn't have to invest much to create the cosmos. Just one utterance, nivru kol ha'olamos, all the worlds, not just the physical universe, but all the spiritual worlds as well. And the entire cosmic order was created from one phrase. And just like a person doesn't expend too much energy when a person says a short little phrase, so too God didn't expend much energy in creating the world. Beli amal, without any exhaustion, without any toil, the yagia and exhaustion. God did not deplete even a tiny bit by creating the world. El al derech. It's similar to another concept derived from another verse, but it's similar to it, where it says Kihut Siva v'nivro, that he commanded and it was created, implying as if the worlds were created by themselves, effortlessly. It's like he says something and it just happens, as opposed to when it says Bereshis bara, that in the beginning God created, which implies Hashem being actively engaged in creating, there are other verses that imply God's disengagement, as if it's happening automatically by itself. So Baruch Sha'amar V'haya Olam, Sha'amar implies that all he did was said one little phrase. And it doesn't say She, Baruch Sha'amar Ubara Olam, and he created the world. It says V'haya, and it happened. It's like the worlds happened on their own, showing how as great and as awesome the worlds are. And they created something from nothing, which means 100% of the worlds are only from him. It's not like there are some other factors that are contributing to the creation. It's only him. And yet, it doesn't take any of his energy. It's from a crumb of a crumb of a crumb of a crumb of his infinite power. Now, this idea that in one sentence the worlds were created. So on the regular level, it would be implying on perhaps the levels of Malchut, because that's where creation takes place, and the last of the 10 Sfirot of Atzilus, that's where Hashem speaks the world. But if you trace this to a much higher level, we're talking about on a deeper level. It's the Amira, it's the saying, it's the statement of Adam Kadmon, of the primordial man. Perhaps the idea is as follows. Malchus of Atzilus, because it's a far more mitigated level of the divine already. It's already the 10 Sefirot where the lights are in the vessels. God has already shrunk himself and limited himself to be much, 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 much closer to our universe, to the creation. And maybe over there we can't imply the idea that that it didn't affect him in any way, that he's completely disengaged. The idea that if creation is happening and it's like as if nothing is taking place, it's a non-event, that's when we go higher, 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 and we bring it, and we're talking about how creation takes place from a more infinite place. And which level are we talking about? We're talking about the Amira, the statement of Adam Kadmon, primordial man, which is still higher than Atzilus, as we discussed earlier, the concept of Adam Kadmon in the last chapter, where it's still the thought of all of existence, but it's the thought of the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof is thinking about creation. So the creation there, a limited, finite creation in the thought of the Ein Sof is literally nothing. And in that statement, all of creation stands equal in front of God, like we discussed in the last chapter, how all the events of the world stand equally. It's not like one is more important than the other, because they're all absolute nothing from this level. And yet, all of every single event in history and to the most minute, minuscule element and to the greatest world all stands equal in front of Adam Kadmon. And that's the idea that with one phrase, with one scan, with one utterance, it all happens on its own. Stated in the Siddur. Siddur, he's referring to the Alter Rebbe's commentary on Siddur. It's a book compiling the Alter Rebbe's Mamarim, compiled by the Mittler Rebbe, what he recorded from his father on the Siddur. And that over there on Baruch She'amar, he explains this concept. Now the question is, what does it mean we're blessing him? We understand the concept of She'amar V'haya Olam is an incredible idea. How all of existence is not before him. It's all created from no effort from God. But what do we say, Baruch, blessed? What does it mean we're blessing him? So, what does it mean? Simply it means we're praising him, that he's so awesome. But blessing is not praising. Praising is one thing. A blessing means, as we spoke earlier, we're either giving him power. That's what blessing means, like you bless a person. Or we want to become blessed from this level. Blessing means we're drawing forth from this level. So he's going to explain it in the second level. That obviously we're not blessing this Adam Kadmon. It's not being blessed by us. God on this level is not being blessed by us. But what this means is that we want to download this very lofty state of existence, that it should be more present in the world. Because this idea that God creates all of existence from one flash, everything together, without any individual attention to this or that. In other words, where the creation is still on such a high level, receiving from a infinite light of God, that is light years and light years above and beyond what we are experiencing of the divine life forces. In other words, by the time the energy gets into our frame of reference, it metamorphosizes and comes down a chain-like progression. It becomes much, much, much more diminished and filtered, and there, all of creation is not equal. We can differentiate that God is investing, pumping more energy in Atzilus, in the higher realm, than in the world of Bria, and then that's when there is differentiation. And what's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that. But the world becomes much richer when we can bring forth this higher level of godly light that is in creating all of creation in one shot. When we bring that into the world, it enriches the world and brings a much higher divine consciousness into creation. It's what we might call, it's mamtik dedinim. It sweetens all the judgments. It removes the constrictions. We can sense the infinity of God and everything. It's a big blessing when that happens. It's almost like downloading a much higher state, a primordial state of creation into the more actual state of creation. That's the meaning of when we say Baruch Sheyamar V'Haya Olam. This that we are blessing him in this blessing, there should be a revelation of Amida Zu, of this level, should be revealed Lamata, down here below. It's related to what he says, we say in Pirkei Avos, in Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 5. Over there it says that God created the world with 10 utterances. Okay? That's what the Mishnah starts. In Ethics 5, chapter 5. Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 5. It says, Basara Mamaris Nivra Olam. In 10 utterances, God created the world. And then the Mishnah asks, well, God could have created it with one utterance. And yet he didn't. That's the simple meaning. He didn't. Why didn't he? Because he wanted to reward the world. He wanted to reward us for our good deeds that we do, in which we help sustain and make worthwhile the creation that God spent 10 utterances on. And he wants to punish the wicked who destroy a world that was created not with one utterance, but with 10 utterances. That's the Mishnah. In other words, God purposely spent more on the creation. Although he could have done it with one utterance, he made it with 10. However, there are many questions on that, because the simple question, which I'm going to present over here, is a question that's asked in Chassidus, and really it's the question of the Medrash Shmuel, who's a commentary on Ethics of the Fathers, where he asks, well, if God could have created it with one utterance, then the value of the creation is one utterance. So if someone goes and spends a fortune on a car that is worth much less, he pays for a regular Chevy, whatever, and he pays for it the price of a Lamborghini, and then someone scratches it, you don't have to pay the damage of a Lamborghini. You pay the damage of a regular whatever. I don't know. My car is an Equinox. You pay the damage of the Equinox, not of this Rolls Royce or whatever. So what does it mean? God could have created the world with 10 utterances, but he didn't. The value of it, he could have done it with one. If he could have done it with one, means the value of it is one. So what does the Mishnah mean? So the answer is given according to Chassidus, is that when we say he could have created it with one, doesn't mean he could have and he didn't. It means he did. God creates all of creation on two levels. There is a more inner state of existence, where all of creation is already brought into existence from one utterance. And that's taking place in the realms of Adam Kadmon. That's what he says over here. In this transcendental deep place, the moment God thinks the universe, it's all created, everything. However, that world, because it's created from this very lofty light, is completely nullified in God's light. It's completely... it's not the point to explain it now, so I'm not going to go into it right now. I'm just giving just a very brief, short explanation on it. And is that world is not separated from God. That world is very, very much one with him, even in the consciousness of the beings. And therefore, there's no free choice there. Everything is one. So therefore, God unpurposely lowered the creation from that very lofty level. And after he created it in that one utterance, which is like that one thought, he re-speaks it, and also and differentiates the light, similar to what we're learning now. He takes that one singular utterance and breaks it down into the 10 utterances, thereby making the creation so much more pronounced, making each, like we spoke earlier, that when you differentiate something, it becomes more pronounced. And more pronounced, the world becomes more self-conscious and self-aware, to the point where we become less godly aware and we become more of a separate entity, and then there can be reward and punishment. However, although this is very important for creation, that God should create us with 10 utterances, not with one. However, it's a big blessing from time to time that God allows us to feel the one utterance, because it makes us become much closer to God and brings the world to a much deeper connection. So that's what we say when we say, Baruch She'amar V'Haya Olam. We want to download the higher state of existence to be visible and experienced within the lower world. But when you gilui b'chinas maimer echad, this is to reveal the one maimer, hakoidel tesma maris, that includes all the 10 utterances. It says that's the word beracious. The sages ask that when it says that God created the world with 10 utterances, but when you look in the story of creation in Genesis, it only says 9 utterances. The sages answer that beracious, the word beracious, which is the first word of the Torah, which means in the beginning, that too is an utterance. Hold on, but it does. Then if it's an utterance, why doesn't it say vayomer? Because it's not the same type of an utterance. It's the utterance that includes all the other utterances. It's the speech of Adam Kadmon. It's not the speech of Malchut. And therefore, it's so much higher, that speech. And therefore, it includes all the other 9. Okay. This is the concept. So this is a very profound concept. You can go on thinking and thinking on this for hours. What this means, Baruch She'amar V'Haya Olam. Now, the Beis is the first letter in this whole series of words that give you this phenomenal idea. But when, as we spoke yesterday, a teacher wants to teach a student the letter Beis, someone comes into shul and he doesn't know how to read Hebrew, and you want to give him a class after davening, you sit down with him and help him read Hebrew, but you don't have an Aleph Beis chart. So you take out a siddur, you open it up, you see the word Baruch She'amar V'Haya Olam. You cover up the rest of the phrase, you allow him to see just the bet, just the Beis, and you say, take a look, this is a Beis. Now, all this person is half an hour ago, the teacher who was teaching this class to the student was meditating in deep meditation on this phrase, Baruch She'amar V'Haya Olam. And they were experiencing this incredible euphoria from excitement from this concept that we were just talking about. But right now, they push all of that to the side, and they're just pointing to one letter bet, one little Beis to the student. When you separate this letter Beis on its own, it doesn't have all of this deep idea. But hold on, you might say, it doesn't have any of it. So we say, no. Since this Beis, it's not a regular Beis, not like a Beis in an Aleph Beis book. This is a Beis that that if you will remove your finger, let's say if you uncover what is next to it, this Beis is going to be part of a greater sentence. And it's going to be lost in the greater sense. Almost like you won't even notice the Beis, you'll just notice someone who knows how to read Hebrew, you'll notice the phrase. You won't. So the Beis will be melted into something much bigger. And therefore, even now, it has a little trace of that idea. Since it once facilitated, this Beis, before you cut it away, once facilitated and was part of a bigger idea, some tiny little bit of it is in the letter. And he says in the parentheses, it's just a trace. And this is kind of the whole idea that he's trying to show us over here, is that an Or Klali, a very general light that has many, many ideas swallowed in it, but when you separate one little particle of it, it suddenly is enormously reduced, can be seen in this example. Now, although this concept that the letter has a trace, is not, he's going to basically explain, it's not a perfect example for what we are speaking about. Because we are using this metaphor from letters for the concept of the differentiation of lights. I have to remember that the general idea is that there are oiros and there are kelim. We are now occupied, our entire discussion in the discourse for the last 2 or 3 discourses, or maybe more, 3 or 4 discourses, is we are exploring the lights. We're not talking about the vessels yet. We're not focusing on vessels, we're focusing on lights. And what we are trying to figure out over here is how the oiros, remember how the lights are also not utterly simple, and how there is a 10 hidden sphirot in the Or Ein Sof, but that's lights. And when we are now trying to make some kind of a surgery over here and bring the light into differentiation, that's what we're doing. We're not dealing with vessels, with containers. It's pure light. Therefore, the separation of one of the lights from the general bundle of lights is what we are after over here, is a tremendous diminishment. But the example that we are using, that he's in order to make it understandable, because it's it's hard for us to think in the world of lights, because the world of lights are very abstract. So he's using an example of vessels, because words and letters are containers, they're vessels, they're not lights. Therefore, when you break away a piece of a vessel, it could be, it's in many ways the reduction from what it was before to what it is now is more than what we want to reduce in our case. Because in our reduction, remember, we want to say that the tzimtzum, the contraction, is not a siluk completely. It's not completely going away from what it once was. We're trying to find that what was once 100% now is a tiny sliver of it. It's 1% of 100%. And that's called miyut. You're minimizing something. It's not metamorphosizing to something completely new. Now, the example when he's talking about this letter beis going away from what was once before might be a complete metamorphosis, because once you take away the beis from the word, is it really only a reduction? It's almost like there's nothing there left from because over there, when the beis goes away from the rest, the oir, the lights, are, if you take the word Baruch Sheyamar V'Haya Olam, and you send a missile and you blow it up, and you send all these letters scattered, each one gets completely shattered, and every letter gets flung in, and all you have is just a bunch of letters on the floor without comprising any idea. You've lost the entirety. The entire concept of Baruch Shama V'Haya Olam isn't there. You don't have the word blessing, you don't have the word he said, you don't have the word Olam, you have nothing. And that's because there is a siluk, there is a complete departure. And that's why this is not such a good example. He said there is a trace, something still there because it was once there, but it's questionable. But in our case, when we are taking up a all-inclusive light, and then we're highlighting one of the powers in it, although we're using this example to show that it's a tremendous reduction, but over here it's only miyut. It's reducing it from 100 pixels to 1 pixel, to a little bit, but there's still something of it. It's not siluk legamri. That's what he's telling us in the parentheses over here. That the example is not a perfect example. Again, and according to our discussion right over here, and our subject matter that we are relating over here, it's a diminishment. It's not a complete departure. A lot of times when there is a siluk, we say that the lights go away completely and a trace is left over. But that trace is coming after a complete siluk, a complete departure. And that's what he explains over here. Because letters is really a metaphor for vessels. And therefore, we're not really comparing apples to apples, we're comparing apples to oranges. But even in this, there's 2 levels. But even in this, it's possible to have two, a miyot and a siluk. I think he means even in the light, it's possible to have a miyot, a diminishment, and a siluk, but he will explain it later, and we're going to get to it in chapter 28. So let's wait for that. Nevertheless, notwithstanding, now we're done with the parentheses. Now let's go back to the idea that when you separate the bays after everything is said and done, this bays, good, no matter how far you're saying it's from what it was before, it's the same bays that was there exactly in the word. Might have been separated, might have been removed and lost all of its brilliance, but it's still the same letter. And if you were to gather the other letters and put it right back, you will have the same exact idea that it was before without having to embellish the bays, without having to do anything to the bays. The bays won't need anything to become that brilliant diamond. It will fit right back into the siddur and it will be powerful again. Because that's what it really is. It's just when it's removed, it's in a very dimmed state. It's the exact same beis that was within the word baruch. It's the same beis that is understood to the mature adult. Who's understanding the concept of the blessing. Whichever level it is. Or the greater concept of Baruch Sha'amar, blessed to see, and the world was created. Or just the word Baruch, which means a blessing. So similar to this, we'll understand that Tzimtzum in the 10 Sfiros, that are hidden in the Orein Sof, that all 10 were together. In the beginning, all the 10 spheres were perfectly unified, vis arvus, and mixed one with the other. The Levad Mashahoyaloi B'Pchinas Metzias Nikeres. Number one, in that state, you couldn't recognize not the Chachma, not the Bina. They were not recognizable. Kenis Kaliel. The Imloi Keni Yevshali Yesesachti Som Yachad, because if they would be recognizable, they couldn't be perfectly unified. Because if Chachma is seen as Chachma and Bina, they would create there is a contrast, there is a differentiation. So they're so benign that you don't recognize any of them, and that's why they're together. But the most important point is it was shining in them an incredible light, a very, very powerful, infinite light. And therefore the worlds, even the highest, most sublime worlds, were not able to receive the revelation of these 10 spheres as they are in this elevated state in the Ein Sof Baruch. If not for this tzimtzum, I skipped just a tiny bit of parentheses. If not for the tzimtzum, that the chachma should emerge independently on its own, that's like the bays coming out, albeit it's the same chachma that was there before. Even though it's the exact same chachma that was included in the Ein Sof, im kala esas with the other 10. Nevertheless, when it's drawn out on its own, the eino mu'ureves, and it's not mixed im shara b'chinos, hareza yeridom imidregosa. This is a great plunge, a tremendous descent from its level, and we're going to see still. I'm just rushing a little bit, so we'll leave the rest, Be'ezus Hashem, to finish tomorrow. Thank you. Let Mashiach be here today.